No red dot.
So.
Oh, red
so
dot.
Representative Levitt will lead us off.
Oh, I guess the thing, we talked about it this morning, is what's considered local for the universal school meals. And I guess I'm of two minds. Part of me understands sort of having a relationship if you're a border school district or SFA with another state, but I felt like the purpose of that was to keep that money within the Vermont economy. So I just would like to sort of hear from everyone else how they feel about that, and maybe I'm misinterpreting. It's feeling more complex to me. And I don't know, I need your brains to help me. Maybe it's because I'm challenged today, but.
I think maybe Mike or Dave has said it already, but it feels like if we could somehow legally, make it so there's a requirement to have it manufactured within the state if it's available, if there's manufacturing or processing available. Like that feels like, to me personally, that feels like a reasonable way to do it. So if you can't
Right.
get it done here because of restraints of scheduling or something like that, I guess you'd have to make the case somehow, and I don't know how that piece works as far as actual enforcement and stuff, but.
It does seem like meat is gonna be an issue. Proteins are gonna be the real issue.
But if that would kind of seem like the right thing, because we want to support, because then we'd be supporting Vermont products by increasing the ability to have them processed as well, like, because we're not gonna be able to get certain things into the program if they can't be processed, right?
I wonder, do the veteran members of the committee who were here two years ago, last year, I guess it was 2 years ago when Act 67 was passed, so it was Act 67 of that biennium. And it was a bill that was an education committee bill. Did it come here, and were you all involved in the conversation about the local purchasing?
I don't remember it.
I don't know.
Nobody anywhere seems to remember.
What was it even?
Well, that we can go back and I guess determine one way or the other what its travels were, but it seems like it would have ought to have been here, Esme.
It says, well, the report here says, report to the House and Senate committees on education and agriculture. So I don't know if the order of that means that the House Ed received it and then Senate Ag, or if that means.
What was the date of the report?
This one is, never mind, this is brand new. This is January 17th, 2023, so never mind.
Yeah,
Wrong
so
report.
right, I think the legislation included a report that was supposed to come to us, but originally whether this committee weighed in. We have a volunteer, I think, who wants to help us. Want to come up to the table, or?
It's up to you. I can just give you the answer if you want.
Sure, what's the answer?
So Amy Schollenberger, lobbyist for all the entities involved in this bill. So the bill actually started in Senate Ag and then went to Senate Education. And because it was originally both universal school meals and local purchasing, then it got split.
Oh, yes.
And of course it hit appropriations committees. And then when it came over here, it went to House Ed and it got incorporated into the community schools bill. And my memory is that House Ag never possessed the bill. But I think there was a brief discussion about the definition of local, but I'm not even sure it was like an official discussion. The bill primarily stayed in the education committee for the policy part of it.
Okay. Thank you for that information. Yeah, Representative O'Brien.
So that, what is local is Vermont, that was in a housekeeping bill, right? That we changed that because the agency brought just that piece of it to
That was
us.
prior to the local purchasing, yeah, it was like 2 years before that, I believe.
And Act 67 just picked that definition up and used it, plugged it into okay. Yeah, Mike.
So I just want to sort of set the conversation in sort of in response to how Josie started this.
about definition of local and understanding for cross-border, but I think what my idea for sort of allowing those direct relationships cross-border, the way I think about it is that it allows for sort of the best of both worlds, where you still allow for a big farm like Boyden who is able to get quantity of beef out to schools that makes the price doable for a lot of them, but is still a Vermont farm and you're serving Vermont beef, while also allowing schools to engage with the small farms that are around their communities, maybe in New Hampshire, maybe in New York, maybe in Vermont, depending on where the school is, and establishes relationships where maybe the farmer can come in and talk to students, or maybe, and has that sort of like what we like to think of as local food in our schools, but isn't always possible for all products. And it's, I think is mostly going to sort of always stay at that level inherently, because farms of a certain size are always going to have relationships with distributors as opposed to direct relationships. And so if you're not allowing for out-of-state products to come through distributors or food hubs to schools, then you're sort of ensuring that only the smaller, farms can have that exemption built in. And so you have both, you get both in that way. You get to allow those local relationships as possible without penalizing a farm a school in Bellows Falls for buying their 2 miles away, cutting that relationship off. But you also get the big farms in the state that can provide that quantity, pumping that quantity to the schools.
So, hypothetical question, but do we know whether schools that are currently purchasing from an out-of-state, a nearby out-of-state, directly out-of-state farm, couldn't get the same carrots or sweet potatoes or whatever from a small Vermont farm that they, don't have the relationship with, but could if they,
One of the issues possibly with that is then if a school is using one of the local food hubs that provides them a report to make it easy for their reporting, if that school is using an out-of-state vendor for something, I guess, and they're getting it from that hub, then how would that count? Because it wouldn't count. We'd have to tell those hubs that we've changed the definition of local to say, okay, it can include something from New Hampshire or something from New York.
Dave?
I think we're specifically talking about eligibility for the grant program. And I was thinking perhaps this might be too complicated, but perhaps we can create a hierarchy of points where, depending on where the product is coming from, a local would be a higher point, over the border would be a lower point. Vermont in general would be like a medium level point system. I mean, it sounds really complicated, but we should make a priority of what you were saying, like local, where there can actually be a relationship between the farmer and the school. I think that really speaks to me. I mean, that would seem like the ideal.
Freddie?
So if you had it so that the farmer had to sign an affidavit that the product is a Vermont product, and then if they get caught bringing stuff out from out of state, they get kicked out of the eligibility in the future. I think if Boyden's beef can ensure that they separate the meat, sign an affidavit, then
Beth, would you mind coming up to the table? I have a question. That makes me think of a question.
Good morning, Beth James, Office of Legislative Counsel.
So We don't have, I don't think there's language in Act 67 that says anybody signs an affidavit, but the farms are indicating that their food's local.
Let me look at the text of the statute. And I will also use this time to ask if you all have had a walkthrough of the definition of local to Vermont.
We have.
Recently?
Are we
And
indicating
would
that we have?
Well, so would that be helpful? Because as I read it, I have not heard any of the testimony you've taken from actual food producers. It sounds like you had testimony from Boyden Farms. And I don't know what that testimony was, but it sounds like there was am I correct in assuming there was a representation that because meat is being processed out of state, they are not being considered local in this program? You heard testimony to that effect?
Not exactly.
Okay.
It was an open question.
It was an open question, yeah. So, yeah, let's review that if,
Okay, do you want me to share my screen with this
Sure,
statute?
yeah.
Okay,
yeah, that would be.
send me a.
I think, so everyone else remembers, and I didn't remember clearly, but possibly Michael Grady told us a little bit about the definition.
I think so.
Is that, okay.
He would have been the one.
And this is, well, I'll wait till it's up on the screen to kind of point out.
Is it Act 129 from 2020?
Nope, I'm looking at the definition of local in Title IX.
So in statute.
And so I don't, it was added in 2007 and amended in 2019. So I'm just looking at what's current law.
Can I see?
Yes.
And this is the law that's referenced in.
Yes, which is, I just want to, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
I was just gonna say, I'm at a slight disadvantage because this is not my subject matter area of expertise. So I don't have the familiarity with the field and how they interpret the law in the same way that I feel comfortable with that experience and education. But there's a part of this, there it is. There's a part of this statute that makes me wonder, is it a problem with the law or is it a problem with interpretation?
What's Title IX?
So I'm gonna, let me walk, because I think this is helpful to understand the context.
There's a way we can do it.
Are you looking at the same thing I'm looking at?
I'm looking at.
Manufactured?
Yeah,
Yep.
if the headquarters of the company that manufactures the product is located in Vermont.
You're stealing my thunder.
Sorry. Sorry, I'm just having a hard time looking at screens
In
today.
this case, I think it's still not,
Okay.
because it's a different company. It's the Moncher Farms.
True.
Well,
But
what
it-
does manufactured mean? So let's look at it together. And it may be that this is not helpful and you do need to make a fix, but I just wanna, mute and
Yeah, the difference between manufacturing.
Processing, yeah, you just read my
it's
mind.
it's not defined in this statute. So let me,
Right.
screen share.
Manufacture the cow in.
Well,
But it's the processing part that's tripping us up.
But
Interesting article, just kind of
I
break.
mean, I
I
guess,
just think it is.
or does it?
Maybe, I think we just think it is.
Yeah.
so the referenced definition in the local incentives school food program references Title IX, Section 2465A, which you'll see is in the Commerce and Trade title. And then I think further illuminating for your discussion is that the section itself is in the Consumer Protection chapter. So that's the context with which this law was written and intended to be used. So we've got it starts with some definitions. Processed foods means any food other than a raw agricultural product. and includes a raw agricultural product that has been subject to processing. Canning, cooking, dehydrating, milling, or the addition of other ingredients. Processed foods includes any dairy, meat, maple products, beverages, fruit that have been subject to processing, baked, or modified into a value added or unique food. So that's where the beef falls, right? So then when we get into,
Not
no,
necessarily.
Because it's just ground beef, so it's still just a raw agricultural product.
well, it says processed food includes meat that has been subject to processing.
Processing, I don't think, that would be like,
Sausage.
yeah.
So that's a nice assumption. It is not defined here. That's where I'm saying that interpretation piece of what the field is doing could be illuminating to you. But if we go down here, so if we're looking at a raw agricultural product, and I don't think in their natural form is otherwise treated.
Unpeeled.
Yeah, I'm not sure that meat, well, I mean, meat has to be processed really to use it. So,
But
I don't know the answer there. I don't know that we
before
have,
it says, I mean, without added ingredients, and it lists meat.
right. So again, this would be, I think, and Mike, if Mike has more familiarity with this, he may be able to speak more to it, but I'm just looking at it from the plain meaning, and this is, to me, very ambiguous given the situation you were faced with.
It seems like it's contradicting itself.
Well, so if we go down, but it was not written with this program and your discussion in mind, right? It was consumer protection.
Oh, okay.
Which means you may want to scrap this all together and create your own definition for this section. There's nothing that requires you to use this definition in a grant incentive program that you are creating. But I will say, except as provided in subsection 3, which is for bakery products. So we're not, or unique food products. So we're not going to really worry about that. For products that are processed foods, which I think arguably ground meat could fit into, local to Vermont means the majority of the ingredients are raw agricultural products that are local to Vermont. Which again, there's that ambiguity because meat is included in raw agricultural products.
Right.
And the product meets one or both of the following criteria. The product was processed in Vermont, or the headquarters of the company that manufactures the product is located in Vermont. So I think there's a lot of ambiguity here for your purposes. There may be no ambiguity here from a consumer protection standpoint if you're looking at, the economy and promoting Vermont products. But this is when a school food authority is looking at what's local. This is the minefield they have to wade through to make those decisions.
And what we've heard is that they're not waiting for that minefield. They're instead relying on producers or farmers who sign something saying, yes, we do meet this. And it's not falling to the school food authority to.
Okay. And I think I remember reading that in the most recent report. Let me just take a look at what the law says.
Yeah, it doesn't say that.
Let's see.
I mean, we could do the easy thing and just add something to the statute. Clarify it.
The incentive.
Well, as it pertains to the incentive, we could just work with this.
So I'm not sure that amending this statute is within your jurisdiction. It's consumer protection. That's just a word of warning.
Okay.
And if that is something you're interested in doing, I would talk to my colleague who works in this title. It would probably not be me making that.
Yeah, we can work within, we can change it, we can use our own definition of, we can create our own definition of local, then
Seems like the natural course.
that.
This just seems like this is a good thing for beef, because if the headquarters of the company are located in Vermont and they have to get their beef processed out of state, that should still be okay.
So, Jen,
Yeah. Josie, I tend to agree with you. That beef is grown and raised and brought to maturity, and to get it to market, they're going from Cambridge, Vermont to just over the New Hampshire line. And to Mike's point about local, defining local, I think it's fairly safe territory, but I think through either an amendment or some way defining local, where we take into some common sense where carbon matters. If you're trucking eggs to Windham County from Franklin County, you know, what's 2 miles over the river in across from Bellows Falls,
Right.
way more local.
And we'd have a climate change mandate.
Well, it just, I think either amendments on the notion of local.
I'm gonna go call on Mike in a second, but I want to also just remind the committee of Henry's comment earlier this morning. I want to ask him to restate that, but
Yeah, Henry's is very relevant, but I think both.
This is the opposite of Henry's. But since we're in the weeds,
Yeah.
I will continue to exist in the weeds for just 1 minute longer, and then I will climb out.
Okay.
And hopefully we all will. But if ground beef is a manufactured or processed product, the beef that we're talking about, Boyden, that is processed in New Hampshire by a separately owned company, does not meet this definition. Because it meets the first part where it was grown in Vermont, but it's processed elsewhere, and the headquarters of the company that manufactures it is elsewhere. So
Because it's a subsidiary.
Except he bought
Well,
it
we don't know how it's legally, what its legal entity is.
and he did purchase it, this particular.
But I think your point is that it's a different company. Yeah. So,
Could be a subsidiary.
Heather?
Kind of similar to your point, but not really. I'm just curious, are we locked into the language of local purchasing incentive, or could we shift it to something of regional and then work on an entirely new definition within that framework? Because I also don't think that we should be dissuading regional food security either, as we're trying to shore up a larger food movement within, say, the New England Northeast area. And I'm just curious how that could interplay with it.
Okay, yep. Reaction to that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally down to reconstruct a new definition for this. I think that's a really exciting prospect. However, it sounds very time consuming and complicated. And since we already have this seems to be like an easy out here.
Is it?
Well, I mean, it's ambiguous. It is ambiguous, and that's problematic.
It's also not in our purview.
That's true.
Yeah, well, John.
I think the intent of this, right, was to protect sort of real Vermont products from Vermont curry, you know, Japan's #1 selling curry, sausage, whatever it is, or Vermont bread, which was headquartered in Indiana. So to take this and apply it to our local food incentive, I think we're starting from the wrong spot.
It's not germane.
We could just say, for the purposes of this act, local should mean, or regional should mean this, and just have our own definition.
So I will just sort of step back and note that, as far as I can recall, nobody has come in and said, you know, there's an issue with the definition. We heard testimony from the Agency of Ag saying, this program is still new, didn't, actually recommend not making any changes to it. Although I'm not sure that they were thinking about how local was defined there. But I don't think anybody other than us, had said, we need to change this. No?
We certainly heard from a bunch of advocates saying that except for Lamoille and Washington, every county is a border county in Vermont. And so these are.
And it could be problematic then.
And we heard specific testimony from school districts saying,
Exactly.
we buy these products, they don't count, we had these relationships, we don't
Yes.
anymore, those.
Okay, good. So I stand corrected then, yeah.
Let's redefine it then.
Henry,
Can I restate my earlier question with?
you got the floor.
So it feels like the two questions that I'm hearing are, is this program designed to be an economic driver for Vermont farms, period? Are we, every dollar that is spent on this program results in an economic benefit to Vermont produced things, and are we looking at creating a culture or ideology of close, proximity or relationships or a carbon footprint aspect of this? And it feels like we first need to answer that question.
And is it an or an and/or?
That's up
part of the
to
question.
us.
Yeah.
Well, I think since part of our mandate is food resiliency, it answers that question. That, this isn't just about the economics, there's an added element to it. And that is the regional connection, or not regional meaning out of state, but region, the locality of, and the distance from the production to the point of consumption, should be seen in that resiliency model.
Josie?
I'm kind of with Henry. I think we need to, and this is going to sound sort of, I don't mean to sound nefarious, but one of the selling points about universal school meals that's working with constituents is for every dollar we spend, $1.60 comes back to the Vermont economy. And I know where food resiliency is in our mandate, but I think it could be an and if not possible, or.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that could work. And if there is no egg producer close to where that one guy was that could give him the volume of eggs that he needs, and he's tried to find it within Vermont, and he can go 2 miles across the border and get the eggs, that should be allowed. But if there's an egg producer 3 miles down the road in Vermont, he might want to think about having a relationship with that egg producer.
There's also the idea of trying to encourage somebody to start doing eggs in Vermont.
Right.
I did, and I guess I'm thinking of it from a production standpoint. As a vegetable farmer myself, and realizing the challenges in trying to figure out what your upcoming markets are, I'm also wondering what component there is to this that is acknowledging all of the surrounding farms in relationship to where the schools are located, and then identifying those farms and reaching out to those farmers and asking, do you even have the capacity to do this? If so, what can you grow based on the season, based on the infrastructure that you already have existing on your farm? It just feels like there's a little bit more legwork that has to exist for the producers and understanding of what those issues and needs are before we say, let's only have this be Vermont based, because there are some communities who do not have farms within whatever region they are that have the capacity to do that as well. So I just think that the expansion of that could be beneficial, but.
Yeah, Esme, you had your hand up?
I think I'm still trying to formulate thoughts, but I see all different sides, and especially, the food resiliency piece, and that is our mandate, of course. And I do see part of that, even though we do want to maximize local foods, and that might include regional, if we don't take initiative to prioritize Vermont farmers, I could see that getting lost in the weeds, especially if there's a level of economic competition with somebody a little bit further away, so even like environmentally, it might be less preferable, but so some sort of initiative for this Vermont First Choice. And with the coordination and extra labor on farmers as well, that is a huge piece. And I'm wondering if somehow in the policy of these food hubs who are facilitating those relationships, and perhaps not even the schools themselves, but really having them know how to support you in making these relationships happen, but with a priority on the Vermont farms, and not, but perhaps not exclusive of the neighboring New Hampshire farm, because I'm like literally a mile away from the border as well. So that's critical too, but somehow thinking Vermont in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just add to the question, but I think we also need to be very cognizant of this body tends to have great intentions and sometimes creates a lot of difficulty by trying to implement those intentions. And I think we need to really be making sure that we're doing it in a way that is not discouraging either farms or the school hubs from doing it. We don't want this to be so complicated that it's like it's not even worth doing it. So I think simple is really important here, and maybe we might have to lose some of our great intentions by making sure that this actually works.
Dave, and then I think we'll do a lunch hour, but go ahead.
The language we've been using it's gone now, but no, it's okay, was local, and then you brought up regional. What about just a resiliency model that centers around economic resiliency, which is the point, I think it was you who made the point that, is the idea that we're trying to support Vermont-based business. That's a resiliency issue too. And then resiliency also goes to, culture and biology. So that would mean distance from the school. And then culture is the element that you were talking about with people, having access to the farmer. I mean, it's very abstract stuff.
So, John and then Josie, and then we'll break, but we will be back, by the way, at 1 for testimony. And then before we leave for the day, we can see if we can possibly bring all of this to some kind of a consensus. John.
I was just thinking of similar issue is this whole crop cash thing. A Vermonter goes to a farmer's market and uses the crop cash, either, doubling their food purchase. We're not asking whether it came from Vermont or not, right? The important thing is to make a connection between that fresh local food and
if the farmer's market has vendors from across the state line.
Which probably happens a lot.
Yeah.
And yet we're using Vermont taxpayer dollars in some ways if we say fund NOFA's program for buying out of state products. But I think ultimately it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I don't really care where the food comes from.
This is just real quick, sort of to Heather's point. Small scale farmers might be able to scale up for a school, but they can't do it if they don't have a contract and they don't have sort of the seed money to bring in enough product to provide 500 pounds of potatoes. So I don't know how we solve that, but you look at a small producer and you think, well, how they're going to need help up front. So how do we do that? And I'm going to cede that to you as a small scale dairy farmer or vegetable farmer. What would you need?
So, I've got to leave. That's the only reason, actually, I'm pushing this. So if you all want to continue.
I need to take care of my.
Heather can charge, and then.
Sorry.
We'll, so Esme, go ahead, ask your question.
I guess just one quick piece, last is that, part of the reason we're talking about this LFI grant, the Local Foods Incentive Grant, is because it was not a part of the governor's budget. And I think that's an issue that's gonna come up year to year to year. And so perhaps one benefit of this is, in combining the two, is that we will not have to have this discussion again. The discussion, the discussion can be about making it as effective as possible in achieving the goals we want to achieve, but in terms of actually making this local foods incentive piece a part of the system, might be a good idea.
Okay, yeah, good point. Well, if anybody feels over the next hour that they can somehow bring this, you know, I don't know. You know what I mean? Yes.
So
Thanks.
just quick,
Fun,
everybody's
It is, this
thinking
is
whether.
very interesting.
Right.
Very interesting.
I would imagine.
Yeah, I think that's a good,
Right.
yeah.
Oh,
But is there a problem that needs to be solved here, actually?
We're just
Um,
overthinking this.
and maybe there is, but, okay, thank you.
I'd say right now we're guilty of overthinking it.